would they win?
Allegedly, I'm live. I'm really sorry, guys. Lucy can tell you the kind of language that I've been using here. If you can hear me and see me, then say yo yo yo. That seems to be the live stream random expression that I've come up with. So to cut a long story short, I use this software OBS, and it's certainly BS. I'm not so sure about the O. And I use OBS, and I set everything up, as you know, about half an hour, 45 minutes before we actually went live, and yay! I can see yay! I can see you guys can see us and hear us. Oh, that's such a relief! I'm so furious because I'd set everything up. As you can see, we're actually out of the garage. I tried about an hour ago to set up an external mic so that you could get better sound quality, and that made all of the settings go haywire on OBS. So I had to then I tried to reset defaults, and that didn't work. And so I went in trying to restore all of the audio settings, so it was filming me, but it wasn't picking up the audio. Anyway, I finally managed to get it working about 20 minutes before we were due to go live. But brilliant! I'll go off, eat some food quickly, come back in, and I tried to launch the streaming software, and it goes, "Oh, you need to download these updates." So I download the updates, and then it wouldn't work. So Lucy was very calm and collected and went off and started Googling the error message, and there were other people online fuming about the very same issue. Anyway, that's the end of software rants. So I can see loads of messages. There's loads of you. There are currently 240 concurrent viewers. So what can I say? That's awesome. Thank you. Oh, 246 now. So thank you for joining us. And I saw some questions were coming in before we even went live, actually. Incidentally, as you can see, Lucy,
one moment.
Check your phone. As you can see, watch out for all the swords. As you can see, I'm in the garage where I normally film videos, or where I often film videos now. So I've got more things to hand. Also, the lighting is better in here. The sound, I think it's probably going to be worse. I tried to attach the external mic, but the software, my computer was fine. The software was having none of it. So what are we drinking this evening, first of all? Lucy?
Wine.
Rosé?
Yes.
Which one?
The one that was in the fridge.
Yeah, we got, and I'm drinking a bottle of Budweiser. So here's to Czech Republic, I think it's from. So there we go. It's not the American one, I don't think. No, where was this made? Let's have a look. It doesn't even say where it was made. Anyway, it's got some German writing on it. Right, so let's have a look at some questions. So there are no super chats yet. I now know how super chats work.
And they're actually a thing.
I now know how to see super chats. So I will be checking the super chats. We've currently got 297 concurrent viewers, and already 54 likes. So all we've talked about so far is streaming software, Budweiser, and wine. So there we go. It's going well. So let's have a look back. So I'm going to scroll right up to the top because some questions did come in before we even started streaming, actually. And I noticed, so there were a couple of questions about arming swords and shield. So we don't have an awful lot to go on in terms of the sources, but if you want to study a treatise for how to use a sword with a shield, go to the Bolognese sources, particularly Marozzo. There isn't a huge amount there, but there's some there. And the other place you can look is some of the German treatises where they use a dueling shield, a big dueling shield with either a club or a sword. I have to say, the giant dueling shield, do you know those? They're the big spiky things with hooks and stuff. They're a very particular thing, and some of it I suppose is applicable to general sword and shield stuff. If you look in Talhofer and Palascal and places like that. But I would say more look to Marozzo and maybe Manciolino and some of the Italian stuff. But that is very much 16th century onwards. We don't have anything for sword and shield really, except for the dueling shield stuff from the 15th century and earlier. But what I would recommend you do is do sword and buckler. So I suspect
I recommend everyone does
sword and buckler is great,
regardless.
and sword and buckler I think is pretty much the ultimate weapon combo
sword and
of the
buckler.
medieval period. But if you're medieval, then it's an arming sword. But what I would say is, if you want to be better at sword and shield, if you do sword and buckler, yes, of course, there's differences between buckler and shield because one's big and one's small, and they're held in different positions and this kind of stuff, or different extensions. But if you get good at sword and buckler, then you can easily translate all of your techniques and all of your knowledge to sword and shield. Okay, anyone who's good at sword and buckler is going to be good at sword and shield, I would argue. Am I good at either? No, but I do both. I do both a little bit. So there we go. They're both very good fun. Right, let's have a look at some other questions that have come in. Thank you, Medieval Genie, for your super chat. And let's see. So. So William Save was asking about arming swords with simple crossguards. Were they still around at the beginning of the 16th century? Simple answer is yes, they were. So the thing you have to bear in mind is that armour, although armour was fading out in the 16th century due to gunpowder and changes in warfare and the increase in the use of sort of medium armoured mercenaries and this kind of stuff, the armoured people were still around wearing gauntlets, and you did still have heavy cavalry in full armour and sometimes demi-armours. And if you're wearing a gauntlet, you can't very easily use a complex hilt. So the thing to remember is that medieval arming swords, they weren't designed primarily for civilians to use with their squishy little hands ready to get lopped off. One of the reasons that we get developed hilts coming in is to protect hands that are unarmoured. If everyone was wearing gauntlets, you wouldn't need developed hilts, okay? But so when we're looking at the 16th century, people who were wearing gauntlets still used relatively simple hilted swords. Sometimes they had side rings, but sometimes not, because you've got gauntlets. So you don't necessarily need all that stuff, but not only do you not need it, it's inconvenient to try and get a gauntleted hand into a complex hilt. It might not fit.
It's really inconvenient.
Well,
We've all tried.
Well, like something with a finger ring on it, like a rapier or a side sword, you can't use a finger ring.
No.
Maybe with fingered gauntlets you can just about do it, but it's not very comfortable most of the time. So yeah, so basically, yeah. So aside from all of those are the reasons. Aside from that, fundamentally, yes, simple cross-hilted swords. 15th century style swords basically were still around at the beginning of the 16th century and still around really in the middle of the 16th century, not uncommonly, certainly on the battlefield. And in fact, there was a return in the 17th century for simple cross-hilted swords as dress swords. I suppose because of the way they looked and what they represented and all that kind of
Sorry,
stuff. What are you smiling
someone
at?
sent a joke on Super Chat, and it's like, that's exactly my kind of joke.
Well, you read it.
It says, intelligent alcohol puns with a friend can make your Budweiser. Great.
And that's from Deep. So thank you, Deep, for the super chat. I've been watching your channel for years and love your content. Happy Easter, you too. Scott McGregor says, and these are both from Canada, I think. Scott McGregor says, have you ever used a random interval timer to train HEMA? What's a random interval timer?
Is it like a random number generator? We need more information.
I don't know.
I mean, no, clearly.
I find it useful to help get comfy to transfer from a guard to a cut to an odd opening. I don't know what that is. Tell us more about it. Lee McGee. Hey, Lee. How's it going? I know Lee. Thanks for the super chat. And, keep up the great work. Thank you very much, Lee.
Drink.
Oh, no. That's the downside. That's the downside of being out in the garage. Lucy says garage and I say garage. Is that insects come in and land in your wine. But anyway, right, so let's have a look at some more of these questions. We're talking about various things that are good for cutting. My general advice, I've been asked since I did the cutting videos, incidentally, by quite a lot of people to talk about good budget kind of swords to cut with. I would say pretty much the entry-level priced swords that make reasonably good cutters if they're sharpened up well, and you'll have to sharpen them up well yourself, probably, unless you know someone who can pay to do it or a friend who will do it, are probably Hanway and some windlass models. But my advice is always, if you're interested in a particular windlass or Hanway sword, avoid Topeka. But if you're interested in Hanway or windlass type of stuff, or even cold steel, then look at online reviews on something like the Sword Buyer's Guide or My Armory, one of these forums, or maybe ask on Facebook pages or Twitter or wherever you use. Because individual models, some of them are better than others, and I know some, for example, some windlass models are really good, and some windlass models are really crap, basically. Okay, so Daniel Taylor is very concerned about whether you have a chair this time.
I've got a stool, but it's good enough.
Let's talk about our stools. No, we've both got stools made by our good friend Paul Bennett many years ago.
Yeah,
They are,
we love these stools.
as it happens, medieval style stools that I use for all sorts of things, from standing on to take sword photographs. What?
We don't saw them.
I saw wood on them. I
They
sit
are
on them
used
for
sawing.
buffing my weapon and all sorts of things. Right. Is Matt late? Did he have too much port again? Well, as we've seen, I'm on Budweiser tonight, not port, but I might hit the port later, depending on how well or badly this live stream goes. Right. Right. So let's actually get down to when I came on live. So Matt sucks at cutting. Yeah, I'm not great at cutting. I need to practice that more. Yeah, probably. He's good at penetrating though. Well, I couldn't possibly comment. And let's not ask Lucy. Oh, the Devil's Edge leaf-bladed swords are fairly cheap and good quality for the price. I don't know those, Scott. I'll have to look those up. So Scalagram keeps making videos trying to buy one for $9 billion. I don't know what that's about. Come on, Matt. Yes, I know. I'm sorry I was late.
More really good jokes.
So you guys posted a lot before I even came on live. So Copis, I never know how to say that. Are marvellous. Killer choppers. Yeah, I love Copis. I love Falcata. I really want a good quality replica Falcata one day. Kopesh is good looking, but basically a farmer's tool used differently. I don't sure I agree with that, because obviously it's not like a sickle. Anyway. Wow, there's a lot of chat here. Right, so I'm gonna. Yay, right, okay. This is where everyone says yo 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 because I'm online. Someone says the audio potato lover. I'm a potato lover as well. Tell us how you love your potatoes. I'm interested to know. The audio's good. Well, that's good. It's just an inbuilt one on my laptop. So Robert Weber. Yeah, I don't know. You're late, Matthew. That is correct. I am usually late, as Lisa's always telling me. Good. Right. So let's get down to the questions. It's not all about questions, and there are things I want to talk about as well sometimes. Garage Stream. I like this. Garage Stream is very Chad. Thank you. I like that. I kind of think of myself.
I don't know what that means.
Well, there are many interpretations for the word Chad, but let's say manly. Let's say it's manly.
Really? I don't think that.
Well, kind of like Butch.
Okay.
Well, it is. I think it is.
I'm not.
I think
not
a live stream
confident in what that word means.
Look, we are surrounded by weapons and tools. Literally, Lucy's got my buffing wheel down by her knee. I've got a mountain bike over there, weapons behind me, and I do consider myself sort of redneck chic. By kind of British standards, in a good way. But anyway.
But you say garage wrong. So.
Yes. So let's go down here. Bobito. Hi Matt. Hi Lucy. Hi Bobito. How's it going? And you are a bonobo monkey by the look of it. No, sorry, not monkey. Ape. Wow. If you were French, you'd be singe. I think it's the same. Anyway, is there a difference between an ape and a monkey?
Yes.
Hello from Albania. Hello, Illyrian Raider in Albania.
Scroll down there and see if they've explained what a random interval timer is.
Oh, right. Okay. How would you say it? Equationist. Equationist? Do you have equationist? Oh, sorry. I'm such a dumbass.
Quarter of a Budweiser.
Do you? This is actually a brilliant question, but you're going to be really disappointed by my answer. Do you have any insights to share on the historicity of the linothorax? No. But, and that's, I always bring my big but into things, and that is that I know what a linothorax is, and I know that there's and lots of people who argue about it, and I know the basic theories of how it's supposed to have been built, layers of linen, blah, 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 and people have built ones in the modern world, but no one knows whether it's anything like the historical examples because none survive, and the mentions of them, there's a lot of controversy about what they're actually describing, and I know that Lloyd Lindy Beige loves to talk about a linothorax.
Just for anyone like me who doesn't have a fucking clue what you're on about, what is a linothorax?
A linothorax is
I know what a thorax
ancient Greek form of armour that it is believed is made of layers of linen somehow glued together that
like lino.
That is a bit like Kevlar, basically.
Okay.
And is incredibly difficult to penetrate, and it was very effective, but also very cool and very light and blah blah blah. But the problem is that the historical evidence for it, there's no archaeological evidence, I believe, and we've only got artistic evidence and written source evidence, and everybody argues about what those sources mean.
We love things that everyone argues about.
Yeah.
Now, okay.
It's really useful having
question.
Lucy here to read for me because I'm not very good at reading.
There is a brilliant question.
Oh, hold on. Lars Petter Simonsen, who is in Norway. Thank you very much for your super chat. And what is my favourite oakshott type arming sword? So I'm torn between the single-handed version of the Type 15, the Type 14, and the Type 18. Now, I probably visually like the Type 14 the most. However, as you guys know, I focus most of my weapons and equipment on the 15th century, and the Type 14 is really a 13th and 14th century sword. So I've always been limited to Type 15s and 18s. I prefer the Type 18 for its bowed out edges, which give enhanced cutting potential, and I just think they look super sexy. But the Type 15s often feel the nicest in the hand because they don't have the bowed out edges. Because they're a bit kind of on a diet, as it were, they often feel a bit more lively in the hand than Type 15s. Type 15s often feel a little bit more tip heavy. But that depends on the sword, and it depends whether it's got a hologram cross-section and all of this kind of stuff. But anyway, great question. So I'd probably say, overall, the Type 18.
But the next, great, wonderful, good job with the question. But the next question says, I'm looking to get into HEMA and I wonder which sword style is the coolest looking. Your opinion, serious question. I think that's a brilliant question.
So that's from Sonar Wave Pulse, I believe in Russia. So
first of all,
do get into HEMA. There's no reason not to get into HEMA. Which sword style is the coolest looking?
What do you think is the coolest looking?
I think to most people, probably longsword.
What do you think is the coolest looking?
Oh, that's difficult. Done well, sword and buckler can look amazing, but sword and buckler, there's a relatively small group of people who make it look good. Roland Vorchecker makes it look good. Done well, rapier and dagger can look very good, although it can look very messy if it's done by people who aren't very good at it.
I think that's totally the crux. But he has said, or she, I didn't read the name, has said which is the coolest looking. So I know, right? So
coolest
when it's done well, which is the coolest looking? Obviously, when it's done badly, everything looks shit.
Olympic foil. no. Olympic foil looks shit. Oh no. I take back a lot.
Tact isn't as strong in this.
So we're getting loads of super chats. So thanks for that. So.
But just so you know, you're wrong. None of those are the coolest.
Oh, guys, I've just noticed we've got 476 people watching at the moment.
Don't say things like that to me. I'll have
482. That is insane.
But the coolest looking thing, Matt's wrong, is always, if it's done beautifully, perfectly well, military saber. Everything about it, and I'm very sorry, backsword and sword and buckler, because I love you both, but military saber, done to perfection, the coolest looking every time.
I have to say, I think to a certain degree, it's the beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and based on what the greatest number of people do and want to do, it's longsword. So therefore, to the greatest number of people, I'm assuming longsword looks the coolest.
You're saying, like, average people are right.
Right,
The coolest looking
let's not be
military
elitist.
saber.
Let's not be elitist here. And
To
also,
myself.
you don't want everyone to do military saber because you want to keep that. You want to keep that as the elite
I
thing.
want everyone to do
No, I
military
don't.
saber.
I want that to be a special thing that only the
No,
cream
do the thing that
do.
you want to do and have a really good time, but make sure that it's military
If
saber.
you're a regular average person, do longsword. If you're a really special person, think about doing saber.
Next question.
Right.
Do you want me to answer this, or should we leave it a mystery?
Lee McGee, in the USA, what's the meaning behind your shirt with the rifle, swordsman, and Lego brick? Well, Lucy bought me the T-shirt, so she should know the meaning. What does it mean, Lucy?
I don't think they can handle the truth.
So,
Do you want me to actually answer?
yes.
Okay, so there was this website where you design T-shirts for people, and I happened to notice that one had Lego bricks on it, which was cool, and I picked 2 other things that Matt likes. And I'm
And that's
really
it.
sorry that it's not more interesting than that, but the conspiracy theories did have us both very interested at the same
Yeah,
time. So
and I actually
I'm
have
sorry that there's not more to
I
it.
actually have 2 of those T-shirts. One's got 3 things and one's got 4
Yeah.
things. And I like the fact that some people thought that there's another thing being added. It's like in Westworld with the map on the inside of people's brain cavities.
I mean, if you've not
trying
watched
trying to
Westworld,
work out what
spoiler
the puzzle
alert.
is. But no, it's quite simply that I shoot.
He
I
likes these things.
I shoot various
and who
types
doesn't
of guns.
like Lego?
And obviously I do sword stuff, and I love Lego, and I have my own Lego, as well as Lucy having her own Lego, as well as my daughter having her own Lego, and I expect in due course my son having his own Lego as well. So there we go. We even have like a Lego cabinet. Right. So Michael Schommer in the US, has asked, have you heard of English forces switching out their swords and replacing them with belt axes during the 7 Years' War and American Revolution? No, I haven't actually. But it does ring. It rings some kind of bell, but it's so deeply embedded in my memory. I'm afraid that I can't remember anything about that. The thing is that obviously during the American Revolution, there was a certain degree of leniency or liberty, to use an appropriate term, given to American militias to arm themselves however they could and however they wanted, within reasons. Obviously, there were regular forces and then there were irregular forces. Whereas the British forces were pretty much told what they had to wear and carry. And if you were a soldier who was issued a hanger, at that time I think it would have been the 1751 pattern hanger, then you would have had to keep it. You couldn't have just got rid of it. You couldn't, you would have been basically charged for theft if you'd lost the thing. It would have been taken out of your wages. And you couldn't just give it back to the armourer because that was part of your uniform. So, I know with even during World War II, my own great uncle did change his firearm for one that he privately purchased. He bought a Thompson machine gun and gave in his jungle carbine Lee Enfield, but he was allowed to do that, or it was turned a blind eye because he was fighting in the jungles of Burma. And he was a sergeant at the time, so he was kind of given some leniency, a bit like an officer, to kind of choose what he used to some extent. But generally speaking, if you're a regular soldier, private soldier in the British Armed Forces, you can't really change your weapon. You might carry an extra one in the field, but right. So
no, it just went down the screen. Thank you, Scott McGregor, for explaining the random interval trainer. It triggers the sound at random. And you can denote thrust down, etc., pass through guards and react to triggers with appropriate attack. That's really cool, not just for HEMA, but all kinds of fitness premises, and I'm going to be looking that up. So thank you very much for explaining
Thanks,
that. That's
Scott.
really cool.
Never heard of that.
When
but
I've tried it, it's basically what you do in class, isn't it? When
Lucy's always looking for new and sadistic ways to get people to warm up and try and get them to fit in training, so I'm sure she'll be looking into that.
But yes, that's so cool. Thank you.
And Jacob Klunder says thank you to this being one of his favourite channels. Thank you very much for following the channel. and for getting you into HEMA. I mean, that's the best news of all. That is literally why I started this channel, was to try and spread the word of HEMA. As I've spoken about before, I saw other channels that aren't really HEMA channels, that kind of general history channels, start to talk about HEMA, and I was like, no, a HEMA person should talk about HEMA. And, you know, other people could have done it before me, but they didn't. There we go. So, and now more and more people are doing it, and that's great, because I don't know that much about some things, you know.
Do you remember what the first thing that you recorded was?
Yes, I recorded a video in Arundel Castle with Scott Brown with my daughter as a baby strapped
in
to
a
me.
sling, but we recorded it so that you could see his face, but occasionally the top of her head went into shot.
Yeah. It's literally, it was after
Good.
fight camp one year, and I said to Scott, we were on our way driving back from fight camp back to where we lived then, and I said to him, you know, I've had this idea for a month or two to do a channel. Yeah, no other HEMA person is really doing a channel like this, and it needs to be done. Blah blah blah, and so we basically decided to do this. Lars Petter Simonson has followed up on his earlier comment saying, obviously needs to take my Type 17 fetish elsewhere. Do you know what? I do actually love Type 17s as longswords. But they are quite bar-like, and you know, like the famous Sempak, like the Albion Sempak. Oh, sorry, I misread you. You're not saying 17. Type 12 fetish elsewhere. A Type 12. Yeah, I do quite like Type 12s, but it's kind of not my period. I guess that's the main part. It's a bit. As you know, guys probably know, I really like the kind of up to the Norman Conquest, and then I really like from the 14th century onwards, but I'm a little bit less interested between the 11th to the 13th centuries, so that kind of covers the Type 12s in there. I mean, I do kind of like them, yeah, and I think I probably got one, but as an aside, is the Type 13A, is the Type 13 a bastard sword? It always seemed like the 13B was the arming sword. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I'm not able to draw down the Oakeshott typology straight out of my head like that. I know that Type 13, obviously, there is a longsword version, there is a one-handed sword version, but I can't remember how he splits them down. It must be said on the Oakeshott typologies, I don't 100% agree with Oakeshott's way of classifying certain typologies, and sometimes he's classed something as a Type 15 when I'd say it's an 18, and sometimes he's classed it as an 18 and I'd say it was a 15. And that's true of other types as well, especially the type, everything between 10, 11, 12 and 13. Some of the differences between those is really debatable and subjective, I think. So Matthew St. Cyr has said, what are my thoughts on the two-handed Scottish sword, wrongly called a claymore? So I've held a few replicas, good quality replicas and bad quality replicas as it happens. And I think I've held one original, but I can't remember where it was now. And I've certainly seen a number of originals in various places, including in the British Museum, there's one. And what do I think about them? They're interesting, and they're very specific things as well. So one of the most interesting things about the claymore, as it's commonly called, is that it has a relatively long hilt compared to the blade. The blades aren't especially long, but also the blades tend to be quite flat and floppy. So they're often a kind of lenticular or lozenge shape, lenticular shape, and they are quite thin. So they're relatively light for their size, but they're not very stiff blades. They're not very well suited to thrusting at all. They're very, very much clearly intended as primarily chopping swords. And I think they fulfill the same purpose as a two-handed sword usually does in most places at most times. But it's interesting that in Scotland they had this particular setup of a very long hilt and a not such long blade, but quite a thin and floppy blade. And some people have argued that this is possibly because there was less armour around. You're hitting people mostly who are just wearing their clothes. So you want a blade that will cut very effectively, but it doesn't need to be very stiff. So you wouldn't be like half swording or anything like this with it into armour, like with most long swords, for example. Right, so
there's a cool question over here. So it's from Grey Holm, and it says, if carrying swords was legal and socially acceptable, what would you carry day to day?
So
I know you've thought about this.
Well, So that's actually a question which I've thought of addressed in previous videos, and I think about an awful lot.
It really does.
And it really depends on what other people wore. So we have to accept that whatever's legal, there's still a certain degree of social acceptance and peer pressure and fashion and everything else. So, for example, everyone knows that in Texas, you can walk around with essentially a semi-automatic version of a military rifle on your back, or you can wear a sword, which is great. There are many things I love about Texas. But, for example, you might find a place where it's legal to do that, but a common person wouldn't do it, either because it's inconvenient and uncomfortable and a nuisance, or because it's not socially acceptable to do. And it's interesting because actually, if we look about the wearing of swords, in European history, there were periods where it was perfectly legal to wear a sword in the street, but it became unfashionable for various reasons, or because people had stopped sword fighting or stopped needing them for self-defense, and people thought, oh, I'm not going to wear this sword around because it's just a nuisance. And so they just started carrying knives or concealed weapons, pistols, this kind of stuff. So it kind of depends why you're wearing the sword and what the other people are wearing. And really, without knowing those factors, I can't really answer the question. Obviously, I would love to wear a sword around on a common everyday basis, and I would wear the type of sword that I like, so it'd probably be a military saber. I wouldn't want to have to wear a long sword around all the time, or a rapier,
I
because they're
wouldn't wear
massive.
a sword all the time at all.
I mean, we drive cars, and getting in and out of a car, you'd have to detach the sword every time, because you can't climb into a car wearing a sword.
Do you know what I'd have? I'd have a buckler and a big dagger.
Yeah.
That's what I'd do. If I was allowed to be armed all the time, I wouldn't have a sword, I'd have a big knife. It's
really funny that Lucy says that, because there's actually a related video to that, which I had the idea to do last night, but I won't talk about that more now. So I'd probably, to be honest, carry either a short sword of some kind, a hanger, cutlass type thing, or a Bowie knife, a large Bowie knife. And, I do sometimes wear a Bowie knife around, not when I'm going to the shops, because in the UK, what the UK is like.
Normally remembers to take it off.
In the UK, you can get arrested for looking at someone funny.
There's another question that you like.
But yeah, probably a large Bowie knife or something.
At this other side of the screen.
Yeah.
From Deef, it says, "Do you have a favourite tank?" You'll like that question.
Do I have a favourite tank? That's a really difficult question for me. I've got several favourite tanks. Hey,
I think he's got like 9.
You will notice a common theme asking me my favourite anything. It's like people ask me what my favourite antique sword is. Incidentally, I've got a whole table of them next to me at the moment. But the problem is I can't.
Don't fall down that rabbit hole.
No, I can never. I can never limit myself to one. Not.
Your favourite individual sword or your favourite type of antique sword? Because my favourite type of antique sword is a Tor.
Yeah. No, I mean that's more of a vague. Yeah, I can sort of generally say things like that.
Anyway.
Do I have a favourite tank?
All tanks. That's his answer.
Do I have a favourite tank?
What about that thing that goes in the water?
No. So I
like them.
I probably do have a favourite tank, and it's not because it's a particularly good tank, but it's more about what it represented and the fact that it was the right thing at the right time. And I admire it. And what it is it's the British version of the Sherman, known as the Firefly. And that's with a 17-pounder, I think, field gun mounted sideways into the turret, adapted turret of a Sherman M4A3.
So specific.
Yeah, so
there you go.
So a Sherman Firefly is the basic answer. And that's not because I think it's a great tank, because it's just a Sherman, and everyone knows that Shermans were known as Tommy cookers, and that they were
everyone
a lot of
that.
the time. Yeah, everyone knows that.
I mean,
and a lot of the time, Shermans were struggling against the tanks they came up against, even to some extent against Panzer IVs, up-armoured Panzer IVs, but certainly against things like Panthers and Tigers, they were just hopelessly outmatched. And they would have been hopelessly outmatched against T-34s, I would say, as well. But basically, they are what Britain had. And I've studied history, obviously. Most people study history from the perspective of wherever they're from. And I have studied World War II mostly from British perspective. And whilst I like, for example, the Cromwell tank, and I like the Churchill tank, and I do like normal Shermans, and I like the later marks of Sherman with large guns on them, and I do like German tanks. I love the Tiger and the King Tiger and the Panther. I actually love Panther 3s and 4s, just really like them, and actually for most of World War II, the Panzer III and the Panzer IV were the most important German tanks. The Tigers and Panthers were in a minority, and therefore not really game changers, not war changers, I would say. But the Sherman Firefly represents to me something where it was a bog standard tank. It was what was available. It was better than most of the British tanks that had been available up until we got the Sherman in North Africa. And then the British went and took a British gun that was better than the piddly 75mm gun in the Sherman, mounted it, so they basically made the Sherman into a better version. And allegedly, I believe Patton was like, they were Lend-Lease, and Patton was like, we want those back at some point during D-Day landings or something. But anyway, so I like the Sherman because it's iconic, important, mass-produced tank. It was like the Ford of its day, and it did, in a way, win the war. The Sherman tank for the Western Allies won the war in the way that the T-34 won it for the Eastern Allies. Right, Metatron, yay, Raffaello, how you doing? Oh, I want to see what Raph says. So I would imagine Linothorax was rather uncommon, possibly even rare, so not as ubiquitous as we see in games. But I need to do more research on the matter myself. Intriguing! Yay!
That's a whole lot of words for nothing.
You guys have got Raffaello on the case, and when he says he's going to research something, he really does. Right, let's have a look look more at these super chat messages. Can we just have a look down the?
That's your next one.
Dark gases? No, dark gas. How would you say it like that? Dark.
I mean, I'd say geese, but I
dark
might be
geese.
Anyway, that's your name now.
Dark geese. What's the best way to restore a saber? Oh, that's a big question. I've got an antique that's in pretty bad shape and might not have the original grip on it. It's also got some sort of lacquer on the blade. Is there a preferred method for restoration? I can't answer that question easily because it's huge. The first thing is if there's lacquer or dirt or rust, you need to deal with it. So rust needs to be stabilized so that it doesn't keep corroding the blade. So at the very least, you get rid of red rust and stabilize whatever is underneath the red rust. In some cases, you can do some removal of the corrosion underneath as well with things like wire wool or buffing wheels or this kind of stuff. Some people, and I have myself, used rust remover chemicals that is used in car restoration. That's used in situations where you don't want to use abrasion, which might remove etching that's underneath the rust. It's a very complicated topic, but in terms of lacquer, use different types of essentially like nail varnish remover, see if that works. There are other chemicals that you can get for paint remover, might work. Various things basically, but you know, remove the lacquer, definitely. You may as well get that off. So remove the lacquer, get rid of any active rust with oil and wire wool at least. And the wooden grip, that's kind of bigger job because you need to replace a grip on a sword, you have to basically dismantle the whole hilt assembly, which unless you're confident in what you're doing, I would probably go against doing because it is a big job. I have done it myself, but it's a super big job. So yeah, but the other thing is, you know, ask in some groups online. You'll get lots of different advice, lots of different opinions. Some people will say you should never clean patina off an antique and blah, blah, blah. And other people will buff things to their mirror polish. And there's everything in between. So you'll get many different opinions, but you'll also get information that's very useful and more than I can convey now. But thank you very much for your question and your super chat. For Lucy, there's a question from Lars in Norway, I think. For Lucy.
You expect me to read, sorry.
Yes.
Is the fashion of the Elizabethan age an added draw, or is it just a bonus? Is tights and ruffs a must for Elizabethan sword practitioners? Thank God it's not a must. No. No, it's not. So, I fell into Elizabethan swordsmanship accidentally whilst trying to be kind to my brother-in-law. And
Lucy's background
wasn't a deliberate decision. It was just a gateway drug.
Lucy's background and surrounding things outside of Elizabethan swordsmanship is basically karate originally, and then wrestling and MMA type stuff. So Lucy's more into martial arts.
I like grappling.
And I'm, as you guys know, I'm quite happy to dress up in historical clothes and do a bit of the living history stuff.
I don't really do fancy dress unless I'm under great pressure.
And I have tried so hard to get Lucy into the whole living history kind of thing, and she...
I did it once when I didn't really know you.
I don't even... I mean... You know, I've done a little bit of LARP in the past, but to try and get Lucy...
One of my best friends is like...
Well, a bunch of our friends do LARP, but to try and get Lucy to dress up, even for a fancy dress party, is a tough call.
It is.
Right. So, so Iron Bat says thoughts on the alehouse dagger and the Danish two-hander. Quite simply, my thoughts are quite run-of-the-mill. I think the alehouse dagger, I think, probably is what people like Paul Wagner think it is. I think it's basically a complex hilted big knife dagger, and was probably a bit like what I was talking about wearing swords earlier. It's a pain in the butt to wear and carry swords, so I think it was probably a way of having something that was functionally effective in a fight without having to lug around a massive sword the whole time. Or it could be an offhand weapon, which would be very good as well. And the Danish two-hander, yeah, the Danish and the, I think there's some similar Swedish ones as well. They are very particular, and we were talking about claymores earlier. And there's a parallel there in that the Danish and the Swedish swords have very long hilts relative to the length of their blades. Although overall, they tend to be bigger swords than the Highland claymore. Incidentally, the Lowland two-handed sword is bigger in general than the Highland two-handed sword, and of a different design as well. It's more like an English two-handed sword because Lowland Scots are kind of English, but that's a controversial topic. Yeah, so the Scandinavian, Danish and Swedish two-handers are very interesting swords. Obviously very different blade to the claymore. They have stiff, narrow blades, funnily enough, very similar to the English two-handed swords of the Tudor period. So there is actually a specific type of English two-handed sword from the 16th century. Henry VIII's armour at the Royal Armouries has one, and they have particularly long hilts, a bit like the Scandinavian ones. They always have a ball pommel, and they always have long, straight crossguard, and relatively narrow Type 15 diamond section blades. So there we go. Right, a question here. What's this? It's
what is the best sword for social distancing? No sword.
That's from New Sensei. So hi, New Sensei. I've been watching your videos recently.
Don't stab people. You need to be 2 meters away from them. No sword, as far as I know.
Can I say
2 meters?
So that's from New Sensei, who has a very good, mostly archery related channel. So go and check that out if you haven't seen his channel.
We've been playing quite a lot of archery. In the
We've set it. We've got some new netting in the garden and target, obviously. So we've been starting to get back into practicing some archery.
And we're not shockingly shit.
Well, no, my archery form is just terrible. But I've been using a lighter draw weight bow. It's about 60 pounds, I think.
I can't pull my bow.
Yeah, so I've been using a lighter draw weight bow than what I used to use in order to try and get my form going a little bit better. Right, so what else have we got here?
Oh, you're moving the mouse and I line things up for you.
Right.
So that's your next one.
Which one?
Matthew, and I'm not going to try and say his surname because apparently you did it right.
Saint-Cyr.
Definitely wouldn't.
Well, it's French, I believe, so Saint-Cyr. Thanks for getting my last name right. I've heard so many mispronunciations. What kind of weapons would medieval bandits commonly use? Bows, crossbows, and swords and bucklers. The usual weapons, really. I mean, you have to remember that in medieval Europe, for the most part, the armies were made up of, should we say, people who were obliged by law to provide military service when they were called upon. Okay, so until the late 15th century, in most parts of Europe, most armies were made up of people who were called up when war was when they were needed, basically.
War were declared.
But a lot of them, the majority of them, certainly I believe in England and France, and most other parts of Europe, were expected to provide a certain amount of their own equipment. And I know in Burgundy in the 15th century there was a survey done of what all the populace, what weapons they had in their houses. So I think basically whatever they want, whatever they had, and for the most part, just like bandits and highwaymen in later periods, you'd generally be looking at a missile weapon and a hand weapon, a fairly usual combination. So for the most part, crossbows, longbows, and other types of bows, and sidearms, so swords, axes, pole arms probably less. Pole arms are more weapons of war, and there were certain legal prohibitions against going into or around cities with pole weapons because they were weapons of war, and they're more difficult to carry, less easy to conceal. And of course, if your primary weapon is a missile weapon like a longbow or bow, you can't easily carry a spear or a pole axe as well. So missile weapons mostly, and sidearms.
So you've got a question up here, which is something that vaguely we've sort of chatted about before. It's not got a straightforward answer. I think the name's Lautrec Winifred. I have a British officer's cavalry sword, and it seems the edge has been deliberately blunted and the point cut off. Why is that?
Oh, well, so I can answer that question. A question I can answer. For drill, basically. So when it was quite normal in the British military to do sword drill, essentially, which was not sparring. Okay, don't think about fencing with these or sparring. It was literally going through the movements. So teaching you the cuts, teaching you the parries, and then having you stand in front of someone else, and you both do an exercise where you do fixed movements. And so like a typical martial arts class, really. And they would use drill weapons for those. And what they would use for drill weapons were the out of service, in other words, the older models of swords. So say, for example, in someone's in the 1880s, 1888, in the cavalry, and their regiment in, let's say, in 1885, they had all their swords, all their 1853 pattern swords replaced with the new 1885 pattern sword. And what they would do is they'd take the old 1853s, the armourer would round off, they'd probably send some back, and the rest they'd maybe keep, I don't know, 50 or something, and they'd round off the tips, blunt the edges, and they'd use them as drill practice weapons. So that's the answer for that.
There is another circumstance in which people utilise swords, though, isn't it? And that's occasionally you find ones that have been used for plays. They're normally painted out as well, but they do the same thing. They hack the tip off and they blunt the edge.
That is true. Theatrical use.
Very often they paint them in a garish sort of gold or silver colour, but they do the same thing.
That's 100% correct. And I've had a surprising number of, probably like, I don't know, 10 or 15 antique swords that were perfectly decent antiques, but they had literally been painted like Lucy describes, and the hilts, including the grips, the leather or the shagreen, had been painted gold, and the blade had been painted silver, presumably because it was rusty. Literally for that purpose, for theatrical purposes. And in some cases, maybe just to hang on walls up in, big houses or castles or whatever. If you paint them, then they're not going to get rusty on the wall. Let's have a little look at the super chat for a minute. So Deef said, you should watch The Chieftain on YouTube. He's a tank expert. No, I know. So I know the Chieftain, yeah. And Bus commonly held myths about the Sherman. I have actually watched those. I know. And yes, I agree. Yes, the Sherman wasn't as terrible as some people have made out. But we also have to be honest that the Sherman was only really on a par with the latest marks of Panzer IV, and against something like a Panther, the Sherman was really outmatched in terms of the gun, in terms of the armour. But that being said, the Sherman was a lot easier to fix when it went wrong. It was a lot cheaper to produce. You could get more of them into the field. Blah blah blah. But the very fact that so many Shermans have extra armour welded onto the sides of them is indicative of the fact that the armour wasn't really up to, especially with where the ammo was stored, wasn't really up to an awful lot. Whereas, the only, well, for the most part, except for the tracks, things like Panthers and Tigers weren't that commonly up-armoured. Whereas, yeah, true, the Panzer IV and the Panzer III definitely were. But, right. Military saber's the best.
No, that's not what I was pointing at.
Tell it. So,
I mean, it is.
Ariosus says, tell us about your Lego collection. So, my Lego collection mostly consists of Lego from my childhood, plus, which I've just given to my daughter. And then the Lego which I keep for me is basically my Star Wars Lego, most of which is stored away in a box, unfortunately. And I really like Lego Speed Champions cars. I find them really satisfying to build the cars. And so I basically like vehicles, but yeah, cars. And I've got a monster truck. That's really cool. Tell us about your Lego collection, Lucy.
We don't have enough time for me to tell you all about my Lego collection, but I have like a Lego, like imagine a really scaled down version of Will Ferrell's basement.
So Lego, Lucy.
I like the buildings.
Yeah, Lucy likes those the Lego
They're
Creator
extensive.
Expert buildings,
Yeah.
which they're like a complex jigsaw puzzle. They take you 2 or 3 evenings to build one of those. They're big. I mean, they're expensive
They're
as well.
so cool.
But yeah, they're nice things.
And I have one that I've not built yet.
Yeah, she's
Very
keeping
exciting.
one for when the lockdown really starts to burn out. We're getting close to that point now. I have to say, I had a couple of times today where I was close to
stare, wasn't it?
where I was close to just running out of the house and running up the street.
How are
and
you
going
guys
crazy.
all coping? I know you're in all sorts of different places, so you probably have different rules. But I think we're doing pretty well.
We're allowed to go out.
How are you doing?
Yeah. Let us know how you're doing with your quarantines or lockdowns or whatever. We're allowed basically one bit of exercise at the day outside the house, and we're allowed to go to the shops for essentials. And obviously you're allowed to go somewhere for a medical emergency. So I did my bit of exercise there as I went bombing around a local bit of countryside on my mountain bike, and realised how unfit I've got in the last few weeks. But it felt so good, and just that 20 minutes cycling as hard and fast as I could, like, really made me feel better. So if you get the chance to do, if you're not exercising already,
Endorphins.
yeah, if you're not exercising already, do. I highly recommend it, because you will feel better for it, and it will help you keep your sanity. Seriously, anyone who's going through any kind of mental strife or trouble or anguish, exercise is a great tonic for helping with that. I strongly recommend
And
it.
talk to people. I think a lot of people are feeling like you can't vent about what's going on because it's happening to everyone, but you can talk to your friends.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love this question. Do you and Lucy have any favourite metal bands?
That's from Solid Bren. Is that a reference to the Bren gun? I don't know. So Solid Bren says, do you and Lucy have any favourite metal bands? Yes. What are your favourite metal bands? I think depends what you class as metal. I suppose.
Exactly.
Lucy's a bit, because Lucy's 8 years younger than me. She's a bit like more nu metal age than me. I'm a bit more. So I grew up with Metallica and Megadeth and Sepultura, Pantera, Napalm Death, Morbid Angel, all this kind of stuff. So I was very much kind of, the music I was listening to when I was a teenager, I guess, was from the end of the 80s and the early 90s. I actually went more into a grunge direction, so I was more into like Soundgarden and Nirvana and Faith No More and stuff like this. But on that kind of, I was always on the borderline between metal and indie and grunge and that kind of stuff. I still like a bit of Pantera, I have to say.
I don't like Pantera.
No, but I like heavier stuff than you, I would say. And what do you?
No, I'm
more...
more...
Linkin Park. We both connect on Linkin Park.
See, new metal.
Exactly.
I love Linkin Park and well, I'm thinking, like, when did I even last listen to music properly? Nightwish.
I love a bit of Nightwish.
Amazing.
I love a bit of Nightwish. Actually.
Yeah, but no, honestly,
I've seen Nightwish live.
I was always a lot more punk rock and emo.
Yeah, I've got I don't talk about music very much actually, but I've got very diverse musical tastes, and I listen to everything from classical to I listen to quite a lot of 60s and 70s stuff. I love the Doors, big fan of the Doors, and right the way through some proper 80s cheese as well. I love Wham, love a bit of George Michael.
Really, genuinely loves Wham. You think it's a joke? It's really not.
But I love new romantic stuff, you know, Duran Duran and Flock of Seagulls and this kind of stuff. To Pow.
Anyway, so very off topic. You talk about more of the things that they're interested in.
Right, so Depressed Cyborg says, did people ever wear mail with only clothes or no punning underneath? Yes. Also, were there any cultures that regularly fought armoured foes unarmoured? Regularly, probably. I'll come back to that in a minute. In terms of people wearing mail with only clothes underneath, the answer is yes, probably, for the entire of what's commonly known as the Dark Ages. So there is no evidence whatsoever for anything like a gambeson until we get to about the 12th century, I think it is. If we look at the Bayeux Tapestry, if we look at the Norman period, if we look at the First Crusade era, if we look back beyond that into the Viking era and before, there is no evidence whatsoever for those people wearing anything under their mail shirts other than their clothes. Now, some people have argued that maybe they had a thin layer of padding, something a bit like a Roman subarmalis, I think it's called. Raphael, I'll be able to clarify that, which is essentially probably like a few layers of linen. So it's kind of like an arming doublet from later periods. It's possible, some people have argued, that that was sewn inside the mail shirt. But whenever you see people taking mail shirts off in these earlier period art, there's nothing underneath but their tunic. So, yeah, it seems like they wore it straight over their clothes. And if we look at the Middle East, that's also the case. And if we look at Asia as well. So if we look in India, or we look at Persia, look at North Africa, male shirts were usually worn just over clothes. Or, it might be a couple of layers of clothes, but just over clothes. And at the end of the day, mail, not only does it prevent cuts and it prevents thrusts pretty well, but also it has a certain degree of shock absorbency to it because it's heavy, and when you hit it, it tends to absorb some of the shock. It doesn't directly transfer through to what's underneath. And were there any cultures that regularly fought armoured foes unarmoured? I mean, I think the answer is probably yes, but I can't think of a clear example off the top of my head. Probably, if you look at somewhere like, this is just one example, if you look at somewhere like the Sudan, where you've got the tribes, the Hadendowa, Beja tribes and whatever, fighting neighbouring the Persians and the Egyptians, I guess, the Persian empires, the Ottoman Turkish Empire, who sometimes did wear armour. Certainly they had armoured, they had cuirassiers, they had heavily armoured people. There were probably, I guess the other example you could go back to ancient Britain, and you could go back to the Romans, and for example, we know that some of the Gauls were very well armoured, in fact, but some of the Gauls are described as wearing nothing. But the Britons, I think probably most of them had no armour at all, and some of them was completely stark naked, if we believe the Roman sources. And they were fighting against the Romans, who, of course, all Roman soldiers had some type of armour, pretty much, maybe with a few exceptions, but most Roman soldiers had very good armour for the period. So the answer is yes. Ollie Foxbow says on the super chat, what are your experiences and insights in mounted archery and Roman archery? So I don't have a lot of experience on either of those things, really. I know some bits. So as my understanding, Roman archery, the Romans pretty much always used auxiliaries as their archers. So their archers were always from other places and using their bows and their equipment, but probably largely equipped with arrows and maybe bits of armour by the Roman sort of war machine, as it were. One interesting thing about Roman arrows is that Roman arrows often have a tang which is embedded in the shaft rather than having a socket, which is an interesting way of doing things. That you find some Japanese arrows are like that as well, some Middle Eastern arrows are like that. Generally speaking, socket is a stronger form of attachment, but then again, if you have a tang, you can make the overall weight of the arrow lighter, which might give you increased range. In terms of mounted archery, I have very little, zero personal experience, but the one thing I have noted is that when people demonstrate mounted archery, it's usually at very close range. And I think one of the things which perhaps when people talk about mounted archers that a lot of people commonly overlook is that generally speaking, if you are operating a bow, you are very much more effective at doing it if you're standing on your own 2 feet. If you're trying to ride a horse at the same time whilst not holding the reins, you're reducing your archery effectiveness to some degree, whether it be in your accuracy, for example, or perhaps your rate of fire. I know there's no fire involved, but your rate of shooting. Perhaps you've got a greater margin for error, potentially dropping things and all of this kind of stuff. So, but I think the main thing is accuracy. And I think your ability to ride a horse and hit a target at 50 yards, for example, is massively reduced compared to just standing on the ground and shooting at a target at 50 yards. Right, Mus de Jessa, or MSD Jessa, I'm not sure how to say it, long-time fan. I remember you, I think, commenting last time. Because I'm a fan, a history and fantasy nerd, would like to hear about Finnish, Vietnamese and Korean weapons, and also more about African weapons. Also about historical female warriors.
Several videos right there.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to do on that. I was actually watching a really cool documentary the other day about women warriors in Japan. And Japan, if we start to look for actual women warriors who fought in close combat, then Japan is a fairly rich minefield to find material. Some examples in China as well, and other, obviously all over the world at various points, but Japan does seem to provide some very well sourced examples. In terms of Finnish stuff, Finnish weapons, so for the most part, Finnish weapons are quite closely related to Swedish weapons. And I believe many other things in Finland as well, for obvious reasons. Vietnamese weapons and Korean weapons. So so there is actually a Korean treatise. I've got a copy of it from the 17th century, I think. And Korea is very interesting because Korea seems to have gone through periods of being more influenced by China, then being influenced by Japan. But of course, Korea and Japan have had a very tumultuous relationship for hundreds of years. And so they kind of swung between these two influences, as well as having obviously their own indigenous kind of styles of weapons and martial arts and everything else. But it must be said, there are strong cultural inputs into Korea from both China and from Japan, and to some extent from the Mongols as well. So Korea is really, really interesting for martial arts and weapons. Vietnam I know less about, but I know that it's got, certainly in terms of weapons, it is related in its types of weapons and martial arts to both Thailand and Burma as well. And in terms of African weapons and martial arts and everything else, there's loads of stuff to do there. And actually I have, just over here, I have 2 African swords, which have been sitting in my sword rack, waiting to have videos made about them. So I've got a Cascara there, and I have a Takuba as well. So and I've got a few African knives and daggers as well. So yeah, definitely something I can do more of at some point. So Lars Petter Simonson says, "Are you in contact with any gun channels?" Yes, I am. I'm mostly in contact. Well, several actually. But I would love to see a co-op with Bloke on the Range. So yes, I know Bloke on the Range. Forgotten Weapons, I don't think I've ever been directly in contact with Ian from Forgotten Weapons, but I watch his channel, and I think he's aware of mine. And British Muzzleloaders, I'm actually going to feature in one of his videos, which is coming up shortly, and I have done in the past as well. So I have done stuff with British Muzzleloaders, and maybe at some point I'll do something with Bloke on the Range. And there's, I think, the Great War as well. I think that we talked about doing some collaboration at some point as well. But yeah, basically, I am in contact with gun channels. I watch, what's he called? Hickok 45. I really like his, because I shoot muzzleloaders, revolvers mostly. So yes, I am in contact, and I do watch them as well. Which is the the Dead Pawns in Super Chat says, which is best tank to run over mother-in-law with?
We're not answering that question.
Well, I wouldn't want to run over my mother-in-law because she's really nice.
We shouldn't be running people over regardless of whether they're nice or not, and we shouldn't be answering that question. So we've had a few people respond with regards to how shit lockdown is, and...
You know that?
Yeah.
Oh. So Hamza Ishmael, we'll come back to your question in a minute. Lucy does have an answer. Right, so So we're talking about lockdown.
Yeah,
and...
just everyone's having a shit time, and everyone who's having a crap time and stuck indoors and bored and horribly lost people. I'm really sorry about that. It's just shit everywhere. And Evan, Southeast says here in the south people have two settings. One, it's the apocalypse with their shotgun aimed at the cellar door. Two, nothing's happening. It's all a liberal conspiracy. That is very much the impression I'm getting from everybody everywhere. Is they're taking it a little bit, extreme in their scared and seriousness, or they're trying to stick their head in the sand. But do take it seriously. Stay indoors.
Mumba Zambot suggests mountain bike jousting. You may laugh, but I did try this. As a kid.
Work.
We tried it with bamboo garden poles, for attaching like bean plants or whatever to, and very dangerous. I'm amazed my parents didn't stop me from doing that. I don't think they knew. So Pekka Senpai, which I think is a Finnish name, says, I've got Lego Slave 1 UCS and it's amazing. I am super jealous. We're watching The Mandalorian at the moment.
So good. Watch The Mandalorian.
So it came to the UK late because we didn't get Disney Plus until
No,
after
they're
everyone
going
else.
to say things and they want to say things about things.
Just
please don't talk about
don't
The
spoil
Mandalorian.
us about The
If you ruin
Mandalorian.
it, we'll be devastated, and that's probably now incited.
I should also say I'm sorry if any
So
of you are
good.
receiving buffering issues. It's because our Wi-Fi is a bit up and down at the moment where we are.
We're in the garage.
Yeah, and we're in the garage, which doesn't help. But what I was going to say about The Mandalorian was I really want the Mandalorian Lego set with his shit in it. And
Didn't know there was a Mandalorian Lego set.
so
I mean,
cool.
obviously there would be. But
I don't know what I'd do with it once I made it, but right.
you put it on the special, except you wouldn't because it wouldn't.
So Jim Nichols, during lockdown, is working on building a chin-up bar, and he wants his big biceps back. When you get them, post pics.
Not even joking.
Ivan Toshev is learning to code and PC gaming. That's all good. I know all of the multiplayer servers are really, really full. I've been playing Bannerlord, which I've now got working quite well on my laptop, and I am liking it a lot. But the servers are, I'm finding a little bit, they seem to be crashing every now and again, so it's a bit frustrating. Philip Batchelor says London lockdown is civilised compared to other countries. Lockdown, my brother is in India and only allowed to go for food. Yeah, well, we all have yet to find out whether the kind of really draconian lockdowns are going to work and what happens when the lockdown ends. That's the problem, because if you stop most people transmitting it, at some point you have to let them back out again, and then they're going to start transmitting it again. I don't know. Man of War, yeah.
Comrade oh my god, Commissar Yuri says, do the Joe Wicks 30-minute exercise. Lily and I have done some Joe Wicks exercise, but she's so active, and we spend a lot of time like playing football and basketball and stuff in the garden, so we do a lot of stuff anyway, and her attention span is not quite 30 minutes long for that kind of thing. But it's highly recommended to anyone with children do Joe Wicks.
Jonathan Alanier says, how do you feel about the 1840 US heavy cavalry saber, the old wrist breaker? I quite like it, actually. And yes, I quite like it. I have to be honest, I prefer the French swords that the US models are based on. They tend to be better quality and a little bit more refined. Things like the fullers are a bit more precise. They've got slightly more drastic distal taper. They just feel a bit nicer in the hand. They've got slightly more between rectangular and oval grips. Don't lose that. So you can feel the edge line a bit better. So I don't mind US sabers, the 1840 and the 1860. And indeed, if we go all the way to the pattern saber, I don't mind them. But I do find, I'm sorry to say, and I do love lots of American things. I love my Colt revolvers and my Winchester rifle.
Scott.
My Winchester rifle is my baby. It's probably my favourite gun I own. But I've got to say, in swords, European swords tend to be better made than US swords. Sorry. Iron Maiden, yep, seen Bruce Dickinson live, and at Reading Festival, I think that was. Who have you seen at Reading?
Too many people.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
You've seen Iron Maiden live?
Wasn't very sober for me, but a lot of people.
But yeah, Iron Maiden amazing. I don't know that I would call Iron Maiden metal. I suppose sort of. Yes, sort of early metal.
You start to downgrade the conversation to those levels, and everyone will argue all day.
Yeah, what is real metal?
Our friend Pedro would argue.
Metal
is only like the most.
Is Motorhead metal? Yeah. Well, everyone knows Motorhead is just one song repeated over and over and over again with different titles.
Oh, you're a brave man.
I'm not a Motorhead fan.
There's a really cool question.
Oh, Rammstein! Yes, Rammstein!
Oh,
yes, yeah.
Now we have to go and listen to Rammstein.
Oh, I love Rammstein. Oh my god, I haven't listened to Rammstein in...
Do you know what
maybe like a year.
Makes me think of Rammstein, the Triple X film.
Triple X, the beginning of... Yeah, that's so brilliant. Good. Yeah. That's Colin, you know Colin. Hi, Colin.
Hi,
Colin. Colin Cleveland says,
how's it going, Colin?
If you have a light kettlebell, roll it around in your cupped hands, change grips constantly, using both hands to do large medicine ball type exercises.
Medicine ball exercises are really good. So if you have a medicine ball, I don't think getting one delivered on Amazon probably costs a small fortune.
So Colin actually touches on, when we're talking about strength and exercises, something really super important in regards to martial arts. And that is functional grip strength, okay? And I've known people who are really built, like spend a lot of time in the gym, working on specific muscles.
Deftones!
But they can't unscrew a really tightly done up, like jar of pickled onions or gherkins or whatever. And whereas people who work on a building site or, doing, I don't know, blacksmithing or something, have super strong hands. But, like our friend Ollie, the blacksmith, he's got handshake like a freaking vice, but he's a skinny guy. He's a skinny, light guy. He's not big, but he's super strong. So functional strength. And if you want, obviously it depends on what you want. If you want to make yourself look awesome, then yeah, you need to hit the gym and probably have a load of protein and maybe some things which are not legal to make yourself really, really big and buff. But if you want functional strength, do functional things.
Sorry.
Right.
Apparently I was getting further and further away from the microphone.
Bolt thrower.
Important
bolt thrower more popular back
question is, what is Lucy's favourite BJJ submission? So we're on
That's from Hamza Ismail.
Yeah, sorry. So basically what I do is watch a lot of Bellator, and I've done a few years ago, I can't do anymore because I have positional vertigo, but I've done catch as catch can. And
catch wrestling.
Catch wrestling. So yeah, wrestling is my thing. But what is my favourite submission? I've got to go with it being an armbar. If you can pull off an armbar as a submission, I always think it's beautiful.
I've never really done. I mean, the unarmed martial arts I did in my past were striking ones. My wrestling
rear naked choke
negligible.
But you can't choke people out and catch. But yeah.
But back in the day, Lucy and I used to wrestle a little bit, and obviously I'm stronger and bigger than Lucy and heavier. But in terms of technique, Lucy wheezes all over me. I'm polite. I'm making that into a more polite expression, but she absolutely wheezes all over me, and it sort of mystifies me what wrestlers and jiu-jitsu people and judo people and everyone else can do to someone who doesn't know any grappling.
Is brilliant.
It's so technical, and I really admire it for that. And I don't know. Maybe one day I'll get the time and energy to turn my attention to that side of things. But I was sort of thinking about doing it. Unfortunately, when Lucy started getting this possessional vertigo thing and had to stop. But right. Well, apparently you robbed George. Presumably in Wales from your
I did. I'm close enough.
All right, cool. So
tell me if you still can't hear me, and I'll
just talk up. We're in a fairly large space in here as well, so our voices probably get lost a bit. Hi from Pittsburgh. Hey Pittsburgh. Do you support the Steelers? That's the only thing I know about Pittsburgh is that Pittsburgh is famous for industry, and your football team is called the Steelers. Notice I call it a football team, not an American football team. I call football soccer, and it really annoys British people. And therefore I keep calling it soccer. Sorry. Right, so, Eastern Europe has some awesome metal bands. I'm sure. I don't actually know if I know any Eastern European metal bands, but I'm sure. I know metal is popular Metatron. People are talking to Raffaello now. Just looking at that.
Did it jumping?
Oh, the Ezekiel choke. Do you know what that is? We don't know what that is. A big kukri and a shield in the world is your oyster. I like that.
Oh,
What's this?
kukri and shield, kukri and buckler.
Yeah. So Lazul says judo is a great martial art that goes along with weapons. Yes, I agree. My daughter's actually doing judo. And
I like how she's my daughter. She's ours.
Did I say mine? Sorry.
Yeah. I made her.
I've said for many, many years, I wish that I had done judo as a kid because it's such a good martial art for kids to do and is such a good foundation for so many other things. But I kind of feel like it's too late for me now. I feel like I'm a lost cause. But anyway.
Not a lost cause.
So Derna 1804 says, "Don't rugby players call soccer soccer?" But I guess I used to be a rugby player at school, but I don't think we ever called it soccer. But I don't know, maybe they do. What sepultura? What does that mean? What about? Okay, yeah, I said sepultura, didn't I? I loved Sepultura back in the day. I think Chaos AD album probably came out when I was about 17, something like that. So. Yeah, Hamza Ishmael agrees. Judo's great. I'm trying to learn more. I mean, what's not to like about judo? Yeah, okay, it's got a.
But you can't punch people, can you? What's the point?
Well, because you're just focusing on the wrestling part, which is fine. Most wrestling.
No, I like punching people.
But in catch wrestling, you can't punch people.
Yes, you can.
Can you?
Yeah, you just have to be careful.
Okay.
Not to show the ref.
No, but anyway, I'm a big fan of judo. I think it's great. And Lily, our daughter, she enjoys it. And it's also because of the way that it's so structured and the way it's so mainstream, I guess. It's very well suited to kids, I think, as well. It's good. Well, let's just have a quick look at the Super Chat, because I've missed some questions in Super Chat. Sonar Wave Pulse says, "What's your favourite Type 15A Albion, and why is it the Ringek instead of the Fiora?" And yes, I'm a guy from Russia, yes. So that's complicated to answer. So I used to have the Albion Cressy, and I found the length of the grip and the wheel pommel uncomfortable to use as a longsword. I could use it as a heavy one-handed sword, but it's not a very good one-handed sword. So I prefer a scent stopper pommel. So that's why I prefer the Ringek to the Fiore, because the Fiore, for me, doesn't have quite a long enough grip for the wheel pommel to be comfortable.
Where is the spider? No, we're going to end the entire thing now and go.
No, I'm fine.
No, seriously.
Or the Talhofer of the Agincourt.
Where is the spider?
Hold on, let me answer the question. So I love the Talhofer and I love the Agincourt. If I could own them all, I'd own them all. I'll be honest, I own the Ringek, but I might sell the Ringek and buy the Talhofer or the Agincourt, because I do prefer the Talhofer and the Agincourt to the Ringek.
Where is the spider?
Right. So Linton, thank you. Thanks for watching the channel. Joe Lewis says, "Love your channel, Matt." Thank you, Joe, for watching. What are your thoughts on Shad's theory about shooting on the right hand side of the bow historically? Well, I know that we've got new watching us, so I'm not going to comment too much on this one now. But I kind of agree with most of what Shad's been saying. Sorry, you're knocking the... I agree with most of what Shad's been saying. I am intending to do a video on this topic, so I don't want to give away too much now. But I do agree that we shouldn't ignore historical evidence for all the reasons that Shad set out. I personally have tried to shoot the arrow from the right-hand side of the bow, and it doesn't work well for me. The arrow goes flying off to the side. But I have watched Shad's videos, and he points out you need a different spine weight arrow for the bow. So maybe I'll look into that. So it's pending investigation, but I kind of agree with most of the things that Shad says, I have to say. Okay? And I am in regular contact with Shad, and Shad's a great guy. And yeah, very interested in that video series.
Apparently the spider's behind the buckler.
No, it's not.
I think they're winding me up.
Liquid's back says, thoughts on medievalized pilum with a spike akin to a poleaxe halberd spike but with a stronger shank. Could such a weapon be effective? What you've described is basically an angon. So the answer is yes. Absolutely. Yes. You could also say an Alspice as well. So the Alspice is the kind of hand-to-hand combat version and the angon is the throwing version. So they existed. Yeah. The idea, the kind of design idea behind the pilum did continue into the medieval period and into the Renaissance. Deef says, I love Firefly, but Centurion equals armoured perfection. What Centurion? Oh, talking about tanks again. I thought we were talking about the TV series Firefly.
Like, that's a great series, you're right.
Yeah, so I love the Centurion, but the Centurion didn't really see action barely in World War II, but it did see a lot of action in the Korean War and performed pretty well. So I agree, but for some reason I've just never quite connected with the Centurion because I'm very interested in World War II and I'm not particularly interested in the Korean War. It's a bit like the Gloucester Meteor, for example. It's a cool plane, but it didn't quite see action in World War II. It flew combat missions, but it never really saw combat in World War II, so therefore it doesn't sort of quite interest me, even though very late Mark Spitfires or the Hawker Tempest do interest me, and even the Messerschmitt Me-262. I'm getting onto aeroplanes now. That's probably my first love, even more than tanks, actually, World War II planes, as I mentioned before. And Joachim says, just want to show some appreciation. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Joachim, for commenting on Super Chat. And Philip, I'm at the end now of the Super Chat message. Philip Nunia says, hey, Matt, I'm thinking about commissioning a sword from either Paul Binns or Todd Cutler. What would you recommend to keep the price down? Keep down the... So don't get a scabbard. So scabbards will basically double the price. Don't get a scabbard. And keep down decorative elements.
Both great people to get a sword from. Though.
Yeah. Both Todd and Paul are fantastic. As you know, I've got stuff from both of them, and I'm good mates with both of them.
Sell your house.
They're both lovely guys. I don't know how easy Paul is to commission to commission a sword from at the moment. I'm not sure if he's taking commissions, so it might be worth contacting him. I do so. If you want to keep the price down, basically do something simple and be honest with them. Just say to them, look, I wanna make something that's, this is my budget. What can you do? Just be honest with them and see what they come back with. What I would say is, in my opinion, Paul is a superb blade maker and Todd is a superb hilt maker. Not to say that Paul can't make nice hilts and Todd can't make nice blades. They can. But for me, Paul is the expert on blades and Todd's the expert on hilts and scabbards. So what some people have done is they've commissioned a blade from Paul and then they've sent the blade to Todd and Todd has made the hilt and the scabbard, or just the hilt. And the end result is very, very lovely. I will guarantee you that. So that might be something else worth going for. Right, so... Joe Lewis says, I look forward to the video. Keep up great work. And I hope to keep your... I don't know. I feel like there was a previous message there that I've missed. So sorry, Joe, if there was a previous...
So I was scrolling down for a long time reading about spiders.
Right, okay. You dig out a good question. I'll have a look behind that button.
No, I'm confident that either they're fucking with me or that the spider is gone. And either way, I'm fine. Screw your house, get swords. That is so often true.
You know what's funny?
If you've not...
There is a spider behind the button.
No!
But it's really tiny.
Oh,
it's a really tiny one.
I still don't like them, however big they are.
It's one of my favourite types that eats other spiders.
The spindly ones. I don't mind the spindly ones.
It's the spindly one. The spindly ones.
I don't like those big fuckers.
That's how we know that there isn't one of the other nasty ones behind it, because the spindly one's behind it. Right, guys, we're probably going to have to wrap this up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. What's the matter?
No, I didn't realise what the time was.
I just saw Iron Duke commenting there.
I'm
what does Iron Duke?
About spiders again.
Iron Duke, I often notice your I see. Oh, Raphael is still with us. Iron Duke's making. Lee. You know Lee. It's part of a long conversation.
That was all about the spider.
The spider fell off the shield and onto the floor.
No, Again?
No,
I
that's
think
Lee.
I
No,
think
I know Lee, and he wouldn't
I
lie.
think I'm being fucked with.
What do they want me to do if I find a spider? Because I might kill it.
No.
No, I don't know.
I think that would make them sad.
Oh, well.
Intranet. I have heard that the Romans used to wear helmets made of skins such as rawhide. I haven't found much on it though. Have you heard that?
No, they didn't. No, the Romans started off wearing Greek-style bronze helmets and their own bronze helmets, basically, and then they moved on to wearing iron helmets, and in various different styles, and then ended up with the famous what's it called? Coolio, I want to say. Coolus helmet.
Half a Budweiser.
Coolio is a whole different thing. Oh
Coolio's
my
helmet.
god, yeah, one bottle of Budweiser. We've got some more beers up there, though. I might crack open another one. Oh, thank you. So everyone's now talking to Raffaello on the chat. So yeah, good to see that Raf has recovered from his sickness and is doing okay in the lockdown.
Disturbed. Sorry, down with the sickness.
So Jim Nichols says the best way to kill spiders is spray with hairspray and then light the spray.
We don't own hairspray.
I've got to say,
we're not a hairspray.
I'm not going to start advising ways to kill spiders. That would just make me look like a weirdo. Because nothing else I do makes me look like a weirdo. Right.
This is incidentally the super chat's not working on our screen anymore, so we can see it in the sidebar, but we're not seeing it where it was
let's
before.
Click out and then back in. Okay.
So it's there are actually more coming down.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they're highlighted.
We can read them in the side, so we
yeah.
can still see them.
So Jake Williams says, with how prevalent medieval wrestling was and how many sources we have, why do you think it's not very popular in HEMA, especially with the fact that it's not expensive?
I have many theories on this.
Yeah. I mean, okay.
What's your theory?
Well, no, you tell me your theory.
Well, I obviously I think
it's because wrestling's hardcore and most people are wusses.
Prongs, but I think that it's because it's much more tactile. So not only does it involve overcoming that sort of problem with personal space, and a lot of people, when you start teaching them HEMA, have a real problem with grappling at all, getting them to stand close enough to another person, even just to do a throw to wrap their leg around the other person's leg. There's real inhibition there, and I think that's part of it, is people aren't comfortable being that close, but also there's a huge amount of trust involved with wrestling, and you get hurt a lot, quite badly, and it's a different sort of thing. But I think that personal space thing that you have to get over is a big thing for a lot of people.
So I think that there's a few different reasons, but I think that the most prevalent reason is because all martial arts are self-selecting. How they appear to the public, how they appear externally, kind of dictates who turns up and tries that thing out. So the fact that modern Olympic fencing, sport fencing, looks the way it does with the white clothing and it's in the Olympics and all this kind of stuff, that appeals to a certain kind of person. The fact that MMA is the way it is appeals to a certain kind of person, or people, a person,
awesome kind of person,
or people who want to be a certain thing, or become a certain thing, or whatever. And I think obviously HEMA appeals predominantly to people who want to do sword fighting for whatever reason. Probably a lot of the time because they've seen sword fighting in movies, or they grew up reading books about sword fighting, or they're just interested in history, or this kind of stuff. And so in HEMA, there's this massive focus on swords. And, the question should really be, if we're talking about weapon use as a whole for the medieval period, why aren't more people shooting medieval warbows and learning how to really load crossbows quickly and shoot them?
So really it's a semantic
or use
question,
spears
isn't it?
and pikes and halberds.
Because we almost always refer to it as HEMA, but actually it's historical swordsmanship if you look at it like that.
For most people, it's swordsmanship.
Whereas to me, it's very much
historical
the
fencing.
martial arts
And a lot of
part.
people call it historical fencing. People who don't like the term HEMA will call it historical fencing.
I use historical fencing when people don't know what I'm on about.
Yeah, so I think that's I personally, I think that's the main reason, is that Yeah, is that most people get into sword fighting because they want to do sword fighting, not wrestling. And if they were the sort of people who wanted to do wrestling, they would have gone and done wrestling. They would have gone and done judo, BJJ,
See, I have a completely different slant on
aikido.
it because I didn't want to do sword fighting. I did it to be supportive.
You're completely
So
not normal in
Completely not normal.
No.
There's a cool question.
Sonar wave pulse
Would a
again.
fantasy sword made of unbreakable material with 0 flex be perfect or not? Would an adamantium sword be perfect?
Well, I wouldn't say it'd be
I mean, no, if it was,
perfect
like,
because
attached to your bones,
only a
but-
Sith deals in absolutes, and I'm not a fan of.
Oh, we see. I think it would be perfect, but
Well,
you know.
hold on. What you've just described could be applied to a lightsaber. It's an unbreakable material with 0 flex. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Can you sharpen it? Yeah. Then yeah.
Well, you don't need to. If you don't need to sharpen it, that's even
But
better.
but if it's unbreakable, right?
Yeah.
How do you sharpen it?
Well, but it's a lightsaber, so
No,
it doesn't need sharpening.
Okay. Yeah. Then this could be an entire us debating this for an evening. I think it would be, provided that it was pre-sharpened and didn't blind.
With the basic caveats that nothing is perfect and
Except me.
and actually no sword is a perfect weapon because there are usually, in most scenarios, there are weapons that are going to be better than a sword. A sword is convenient to wear
Don't
and
talk
is a
about
side
spiders anymore.
Hi from Switzerland, Leviata11. Hello. I like Switzerland a lot. I'm very much jealous of your gun laws.
So someone subsidiary 3.
Where's Oscar gone?
Grappling and
Oscar's-
wrestling once you get older and take longer to heal is not always a great idea. It's the huge problem, but there's some really cool
And
wrestling instructors.
Everybody I know who has done grappling for any amount of time is riddled with injuries and ailments.
So I got this like this is so gross. I got this cyst in my face recently that the dentist found that was causing me dental pain, and she couldn't work out how it got there and asked me if I'd been in car crash and stuff like this, and I told her that I'd done wrestling, and she was like, oh, well, that will be it. This is the kind of thing that gives you these weird inexplicable pains. So I've knocked out my inner ear, and it's worth it. Do it anyway.
Tobias V says, when is the review of the Dynasty Forge Okatana coming? That is a very, very good question. And I was literally today thinking, I really need to review. I think it's the last one of the swords that they sent me. And I'm really sorry that it's taken so long for me to get around to doing that. I will try to do it in the next couple of weeks because I really need to pull my finger out and do that. Right, I did mention just before the live stream started that there is a Witcher-related announcement, and you will remember that I did a video.
Is this a thing that I don't know about?
Yes. Hold on. So I did a video where I said I'm not Nick Jeffries, and the reason for that is that there was a video that went around the internet and got shared everywhere about The Witcher and about the fighting styles and the weapons and everything else in The Witcher. And Nick Jeffries
Poor
was
Nick.
mentioned, and he's the armourer for The Witcher, and they showed me here in my garage waving a sword around when they were talking about Nick Jeffries. So I did a video saying I'm not Nick Jeffries. Well, do you know what, guys? I've got some news for you. Do you know who emailed me today?
Really?
Nick Jeffries saw the video and has got in contact with me.
Oh, how funny!
So anyway, I had a quick
that's
read
so
of it.
cool.
I haven't had a chance to reply yet because it came in this afternoon. But so I'm in contact with Nick Jeffries. So there we go.
Amazing.
And hopefully, there might be a possibility to do a video with him at some point because he's here in the UK. So, and who knows? Maybe I'll try and wangle a video with Nick Jeffries and The Witcher himself. No, Lucy, you can't come. You're not allowed to come and meet him. No.
Can I bring Lady?
You'll be busy that day. No. My God. Just because he's got hair.
That's not even his hair, it's a wig.
That's true. In fact, you prefer the wig to his real hair. So, Iron Duke, 99 Iron Duke, with a picture of the Duke of Wellington, says, Why do you think they replaced the British cavalry saber in the mid-1880s with what most people seem to think was an inferior weapon? I don't know. I mean, that's a very good topic for a video, but I would have to sit down and actually think about what I was going to say before I turned the camera on, which is actually quite unusual for me.
We'll think about it later.
Yeah, I honestly don't know, and I agree. The 1885 was a very unsatisfactory sword. I think the 1864 is better. I think the 1853 is better, especially if you put a better guard on it, when it then becomes the 1864. It's clear that they had decided to downsize the saber slightly, but I'm not really sure why. I don't know why they felt the need to reduce the size by 1 inch and reduce the width by about 1/8 of an inch. I don't know. Right. Right, okay, I'm having a quick look through. So Hermes Pino says, why did British military swordsmanship gradually change from a cut-centric style to a thrusting style during the 19th century? Well, it actually didn't, really. British military swordsmanship didn't change very much between the Napoleonic era and 1895, when the Italian system of Ferdinand Masiello was introduced. And it has to be said, by 1895, swordsmanship had become, in most of the army, if not entirely, had become fairly irrelevant and had become almost an academic classroom exercise. And Masiello's method was not well accepted. And in fact, there are numerous. There's an article on Eastern Antique Arms. If you go on the research page on Eastern Antique Arms, you can actually read a whole massive article I put together about this and the design of the swords. However, it should be agreed to some extent that the design of the swords did move partially from, let's say, the 1803 pattern saber, which is a bit like 1796. It did move to a narrower, more pointy design blade, but really, even from the pipe back to the 1845 style blade, they're both slightly curved and they're both quite pointy. It stayed the same, really, right the way through. And you could say, in the 1796 Spadroon, it is almost a purely thrusting. Yeah, actually, you can cut with it, but it is primarily a thrusting sword. So I don't think it really is such a clean transition, direct transition. It's really what we're looking at is the introduction of Masiello's method in 1895, and that wasn't very well received, wasn't very popular. Really, it didn't gain a strong footing in usage, I don't think.
Harry's asked a question. Harry McCusker. Hi, Harry.
Hi, Harry.
Do we know anything about cavalrymen using the 1908 sword in duels?
No. We know quite a bit about them using it in war, in World War One, and as I often mention, because I think everybody should know this fact, the first confirmed kill by a British soldier in World War One was with a 1908 pattern sword, cavalry officer using a 1908, killing a German cavalry scout. But in duels, no, I don't think it was ever used in a duel. I've never even seen a vague mention of it yet ever used in a duel. And for duels, by that point, if they happened, and there were very rarely any duels in Britain by that date, they used a pistol, pretty much. And pistols have become pretty much normal for dueling in Britain from about the 1840s or 50s, I would think. There are sword duels in Britain, very, very rare after that. Yay for Lucy Easton, says Jeremy Rintoul. Alex Hutchins asks an interesting question. What do you think about the use of the Swiss saber? I've been sparring with one for years, but I have consistently used it in one hand. Okay. Based on the Swiss sabers that I've seen, they kind of seem like long swords, really. And there is one famous image of someone using what you might describe as a two-handed messer. And they're using it opposite someone with a longsword, and they're both standing in very similar positions. So, long live Scotland, says Paul C. Robertson. I'm part Scottish, so one of my ancestors apparently fought for Robert the Bruce, so there we go. And McCusker, we got your surname right. What? How did we get it wrong? Harry McCusker.
He's never said anything about his surname. Where are you reading?
He says, you got my surname right, Harry McCusker. How else would you say it?
We've met.
Yeah, we know who you are, Harry.
We know you.
We know who you are. We know where you live.
Although, in fairness, we did get one of our friends' surnames wrong for some years. Yeah, we do need to spar. I mean, hopefully, fight camp might still happen.
Yeah, I mean, we're planning for fight camp to happen, but we're not going to open registration until
we're going to delay
much closer.
Opening tickets until about a month beforehand, and obviously only if it's sensible and appropriate to do so.
Rami says, "What's my opinion on the Spanish 1907 cavalry sword?" Yes, good. It's nice. It's all right.
It's not a strong opinion, but it is one.
Yeah.
Someone else something about Rotella. Where is that?
How did the Rotella develop after the movement to smaller shields like the buckler, yet still get used together with the size of... So I think there's a misunderstanding there. So that's Dark Pierce 629. The Rotella... So the buckler had been around since the 12th century as a sidearm accompaniment to the sword. And it was around at the same time as larger shields, both heater-shaped ones, large pavis type ones, longer, bigger versions of the heater shield, and round shields as well. And the buckler stayed in use right the way through to the 17th century, although it fell out of popular use in the middle of the 16th century, maybe the later 16th century. And yes, in fact, the later, about 1580s, 1590s, certainly in Britain. And the Rotella pretty much was in continuous use. So they were around at the same time, and really large shields are battlefield things, and bucklers are things that can be used on the battlefield, but can equally be used in civilian life more practically. And if you're something like an archer or a crossbowman, so you've got a job which involves you to do lots of, manual actions with your bigger weapon, or you're loading things, or operating a siege engine, or cannons, or whatever, then a buckler is easier to wear, and a large shield you can't really carry around so easily.
Probably
so we need to wrap it up now, I'm afraid. So let's just the Crimson Fucker. I love that as a username. Were shields larger than bucklers ever worn at the thigh or under the arm like swords? Yes, is the answer to that. Particularly in France. So if you look at 14th century French knightly brasses and effigies, sometimes they used to have a heater shield, much like the white one, which messes with my light balance on my camera, hung from the hilt of their arming sword, exactly like you'd hang a buckler. But they were small heater shields. So yes, sometimes large shields could be hung from the hilt, like a buckler. Are cup hilts always better than swept hilts on rapiers? That's a big question. No is the answer.
Choose a small question and
good.
Do the last
right,
question.
I just need to
go.
I just need to check the super chat. Hold on. Oh, I think we've got them all now.
Yeah.
I think we got all the super chats done. Hooray! Right. So last question.
It's too much pressure for you, isn't it?
Here we go. James Ash says, who would win in a one-on-one fight with claymores? You or your wife?
Him.
Me. Sorry.
Sad times. There you go.
Oh, hold on. No, final last question. Justin Cook says, was the Scivona used similar to how the Scottish broadsword was used? Probably not. No. Because they come from different traditions. And the Highland broadsword is very much part of British basket-hilted sword use. And the Scivona, associated with, obviously, originally with the Balkans, but more probably mostly Serbia, Croatia, but came into the Venetian sphere, and I believe would have been used more similar to a side sword, but it may have been held more predominantly forward than a side sword. It's really a shame that we don't have a Scivona treatise. But obviously you could use a Scivona in the system of British backsword or broadsword, or Highland broadsword, but I don't think that's how most Scivonas were used. Right, final question, because there's one more super chat just come in. Vida Provost says, did you see Todd messing around with waxed arrowheads for gamson penetration? Thoughts? I did, and it's awesome and really interesting. I actually don't have anything to add to Todd's experiments, but I was talking to Todd last night, and as soon as we can, we're going to do some more videos together. As you guys know, I love doing videos with Todd. I don't live that far away, from a couple of hours drive away from him. So once the lockdown's over, I'm definitely going to do some more videos with Todd, 100%. And I don't have anything to add to his videos on testing things, because he's the expert on those. He's got all the equipment at hand. He's doing great experiments with all the correct caveats and everything else. And I'm really feeding off his videos as much as you guys are, and enjoying them as much as you are. Right, we're going to have to sign out now. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for the super chats as well. Very much appreciated.
General comments
and stay strong in the lockdown. I will, of course, or we will do another live stream when we can schedule another one. Watch on the Facebook page and on everywhere else that I put stuff up. And I will let you know, at least with 24 hours notice, hopefully 48 hours notice, of when we're going to do another live stream. And there's lots more videos on the way. And thanks for joining us. See you guys.
Bye.
Take care. Stay safe.